During our mother's funeral, my cousin mocked my poverty in front of everyone, until I revealed her secret adoption papers that disinherited her. The air inside St. Augustine's was too still, too polished, like grief forced into something presentable. Floral arrangements lined every pew, white lilies and roses arranged so precisely they looked like props on a stage. But nothing about today felt scripted, and certainly nothing smelled of comfort. Death had a way of bringing out the truth in people. And as I stood in the second row beside my aunt's rigid form, it wasn't loss I felt. It was the tightening knot of anticipation. My mother's casket sat in the center, its oak polished to a deep sheen, reflecting the golden light cast through the high, stained glass windows. The priest was reciting psalms with practiced solemnity, yet I heard none of it. I was focused on the edge of my vision, where my cousin Lydia had just stepped into view. Her heels clicked against the stone floor with deliberate elegance, each step calculated to draw attention. She wore black like it was her chosen shade of royalty, a silk scarf draped over one shoulder, her glossy hair untouched by the breeze outside that had ruffled mine. She didn't cry. Not a single tear marred the thick powder on her face. Instead, she studied me with a curled lip of mild amusement, her eyes taking in my worn-out suit, the creased collar, the scuffed tips of my shoes that hadn't known polish in years. My tie was slightly off-center. I knew. I'd adjusted it 3 times in the mirror before giving up entirely. Then she spoke. Not in a whisper, not as a muttered remark behind a hand, but loud enough that half the church turned their heads, the hymn faltering in the background. Well, Lydia began with a cruel smile, her voice light as if sharing a private joke with the entire congregation. Grief doesn't seem to pay well, does it? Maybe Aunt Miriam should have left you something, like a comb, or better shoes. A few chuckles rose from the front row. People I hadn't seen in years, people who never brought groceries when Mom was too sick to shop, laughed like it was a comedy show. Lydia didn't even flinch at their reactions. Her hand rested lightly on her hip, chin tilted high, smugness woven into every muscle of her posture. But I didn't move. I didn't let the heat on my face break me. I stood still, my hand tightening around the inside of my coat pocket. Because I had come prepared. A week before she passed, Mom had handed me an envelope. Plain, unremarkable at first glance, yet heavier than it should have been. She'd been frail then, her voice barely more than a whisper, but her eyes had carried the same sharpness that raised me. "Open it when you need to," she had said. "Not before. You'll know when the time is right." Now, as Lydia basked in the shallow spotlight of her own cruelty, I realized the time had come. I reached into my coat and drew the envelope out slowly, deliberately. The paper crinkled softly as I opened it, revealing neatly folded documents inside. My fingers slid over the pages, pausing on the one with the bold heading, Adoption Certificate. Her name was there. Lydia Corwin, adopted daughter of Esther and Francis Corwin. Not biological, not born into the family, not Miriam's blood. My mother had known it for years, kept it quiet, shielded it, perhaps even protected Lydia longer than she should have. But with death at her door, she decided the truth needed to outlive her. The next sheet bore a signature line, blank. It was an unsigned inheritance document. And beneath it, the third, a notarized letter from Mom's lawyer dated 2 weeks ago, instructing that Lydia was to receive nothing from her estate. Not the house, not the car, not even the antique brooch she always eyed with feigned sentiment. I walked forward. Each step seemed to echo in the hushed room. The priest paused, eyebrows raising in confusion. Murmurs rippled as I approached the front, the envelope firm in my grip. Lydia's smirk faltered slightly. Her fingers curled in on themselves, but she still held her ground like a queen who didn't yet realize her crown was forged from glass. The family attorney, Mr. Ulridge, stood near the pulpit, flanked by 2 assistants in dark suits. I handed him the envelope without a word. He opened it, brow furrowing as he read the first page, then the second, then the third. His expression shifted, settling into a quiet seriousness as he nodded once, confirming what I already knew. I turned to the congregation, my voice firm, unwavering. "You should have read the fine print before opening your mouth." A silence unlike anything I had ever experienced fell over the chapel. Even the priest said nothing. No coughs, no shifting in seats, just pure, unfiltered quiet. Lydia's skin lost its color in an instant. Her eyes darted to the lawyer, to the papers in his hands, then to me. She opened her mouth, perhaps to speak, perhaps to object, but no words came. Her hand, the one that had so confidently rested on her hip, dropped to her side. Her lip trembled. The murmurs began then, from the people who had just moments ago laughed. Quiet, bewildered questions passed between them like sparks in dry grass. Someone leaned to whisper to another. A woman in a blue hat gasped. My aunt pressed her gloved hand against her chest. Mr. Ulrich cleared his throat, stepping toward the microphone. For those of you present, he said with calm authority, I have just been handed documents pertaining to Miriam Kane's final wishes. These include a letter of instruction, a signed statement, and supporting records confirming that Lydia Corwin, while a beloved niece in this family's eyes, was legally adopted and specifically disinherited from Miss Kane's estate. All inheritance, per the documents, is to be transferred solely to her biological son. The words struck the air like a bell toll, final and resonant. Lydia took a step back, her heel catching the edge of the carpet. She steadied herself, but her entire body shook with the weight of what had just unfolded. She was no longer the crowned heir. No longer the polished, favored girl who strutted through our family gatherings with the confidence of someone born into privilege. She was exposed, not just in front of the family, but the entire town that filled the pews, people who gossiped over garden fences and whispered in church halls. I didn't know, she stammered, the words barely audible. Her voice cracked, void of its usual flair. She never said anything. Mr. Ulrich folded the documents and returned them to his briefcase. Everything is properly notarized, witnessed. The instructions are clear. Miss Kane's estate belongs to her son. I said nothing further. I didn't need to. The silence did more than enough. I returned to my seat, brushing past Lydia as she stood frozen, her presence no longer drawing eyes in admiration, but in curiosity, pity, and perhaps a trace of schadenfreude. The service continued. The priest hesitated, then cleared his throat and resumed the scripture, though now his voice trembled slightly, unsure whether reverence could cover the fissure that had just cracked through the room. Lydia didn't speak again during the ceremony. Her earlier arrogance had dissolved entirely, replaced by the stunned quiet of someone watching a stage collapse beneath their feet. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because she didn't yet know how to process what she'd lost. The funeral ended the way most do, too slow for the grieving, too fast for the guilty. As the last verse of the hymn trailed off and the organ fell silent, people rose with a mixture of stiffness and unease. The rows shuffled toward the exit in uneven lines, some brushing past Lydia without a glance, others throwing her hesitant looks before quickly averting their eyes. No one offered her a tissue. No one reached for her arm. I remained seated, watching her. She hadn't moved since the lawyer's announcement. Her face was blank now, as if she was trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through her fingers. The moment she had planned, where she would glide through the grieving crowd, collecting whispers of sympathy and inherited glory, had collapsed into dust. When the chapel emptied, I stood. Lydia looked up at me, her eyes no longer condescending but searching, trying to read a face she thought she understood. She opened her mouth again, but I walked past her. She wasn't owed my comfort. Outside, the sky was a heavy gray. Not dramatic, just dull. The kind of overcast that made everything seem muted. Rain hadn't come, but the air felt like it wanted to. A light breeze pressed against the black fabric of the funeral tent set near the burial site. The family followed the casket in silence. A procession of forced solemnity. My Aunt Frances, Lydia's adoptive mother, dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She hadn't looked at me once since the envelope. I knew why. She was trying to calculate what else I might have. What else I knew? The priest resumed his role, this time graveside, his voice echoing faintly across the open cemetery. The casket was lowered, the final rites spoken with practiced detachment. A few relatives murmured their farewells. Some crossed themselves. One uncle placed a single rose on top, his face unreadable. When it was done, people began to drift away. Conversations broke out in hushed tones near the parking lot. Some glanced back at me as they left. I didn't follow. I stayed rooted near the fresh grave, my eyes on the patch of earth that would soon swallow what remained of her body. A voice broke the silence beside me. You waited. It was Lydia. Her heels were off now, clutched in one hand, her feet bare on the cold grass. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the smug tone she usually carried like perfume. I didn't answer her. "You knew the whole time," she said again. "When she died, you didn't say anything. You let me plan everything. You let me think I was in charge." Still, I said nothing. I wanted her to keep talking. "She didn't even tell me," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "Not once, not even in the hospital." "She didn't owe you that," I replied. My voice wasn't cruel, just honest. "You made your position clear every chance you got." Lydia flinched. "She was my aunt." "No," I said, turning to face her. "She was my mother. You made her a stage. You used her to play a part you thought you were entitled to, and now the script is gone, and so is your role." She looked away, blinking fast. "You think you're better than me now? Because you have papers?" I stepped closer, my voice even. "I don't need to think anything. The truth stands on its own. You can spin it however you want, but you knew she was slipping, and you chose to make it about yourself." Her jaw tensed. "She let me believe I was family." "She never said otherwise," I replied. "But you crossed the line when you turned her illness into a performance. When she needed care, you were booking spa weekends. When she called for help, you sent flowers instead of showing up." Lydia dropped her shoes on the grass and folded her arms. "You think this makes you noble, coming here in that suit, pulling out documents like a showman at a circus?" I didn't take the bait. I didn't come for revenge. I came to stop a lie from being buried with her. Her expression faltered again. "Then why do it in front of everyone?" I stepped past her, eyes on the casket, "because you mocked me in front of everyone." There was no satisfaction in the silence that followed, just clarity. The breeze picked up, carrying the faint scent of damp soil. Lydia stayed behind, her heels forgotten on the grass. I walked toward the parking lot, where the cars were already thinning. Mr. Aldridge waited near his sedan, the briefcase still in hand. He nodded as I approached. "You handled it well. I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't supposed to be easy," I said. "Just necessary." He unlocked his car and opened the passenger door. "The house is yours now, everything in it. I'll have the formal transfer ready in 3 days." "Do you plan to move back in?" I paused, unsure. The house was more than bricks and memory. It held every echo of her voice, every shadow of her absence. "Maybe," I replied. "One room at a time." He gave a small nod. "Let me know if you need anything." I watched him drive off before turning back toward the cemetery. Lydia was gone. Her footprints were still faintly visible in the dirt, but she had vanished. Probably to Aunt Frances' car. Probably to figure out what came next. I didn't envy her. Not because she had lost the estate, but because she had built her sense of self around a fiction. And now, without that story, she would have to find something real, something not borrowed or inherited. I returned to the house that night. It was quiet, colder than I remembered. The lights flickered slightly when I turned them on, a reminder that time had passed without upkeep. Dust clung to surfaces, books leaned sideways on the shelves, and a stack of unopened letters lay near the door. I didn't go through them. Not yet. Instead, I walked to her room. The bed was still made. Her scent lingered faintly on the sheets, and a glass of water still stood half full on the nightstand. I sat at the edge of the mattress, the documents spread on my lap. The adoption papers, the unsigned inheritance, the letter with her looping handwriting. My fingers traced the edge of the paper, the familiar curls of her penmanship. "To my son," it read. "Not everything can be said aloud. Some truths are better left for moments like these, when there is nothing left to take, only something to protect. She was not my daughter. She was never meant to be part of what I leave behind. You are my legacy, not because of blood, but because you never asked for anything and still gave me everything. This is yours. Use it wisely." I closed the letter. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scraped against the window panes, and the first drop of rain tapped against the glass. This house was mine now. The responsibility, the silence, the memories, all of it. 3 days after the funeral, the house felt different. Not haunted, but alert, like it had been waiting for someone to come back and finish what had been left undone. The floorboards creaked more than I remembered, not from age, but as if the place was stretching after being still too long. I had lived here once, before life took its turns. Now I was back, Not as a guest, not as a visitor, but the rightful heir, though nothing about it felt victorious. Mr. Ulrich arrived just after noon with the final papers. We sat at the dining table where my mother used to lay out bills and grocery lists, the same table where she used to teach me how to sort coins by value and where she cried quietly the day she lost her job. It wasn't the kind of place you signed legal documents for inheritance. But there we were. These are the final forms, Ulrich said, spreading the stack out carefully. Transfer of title for the house. Authorization to access the bank account. A clause stating that Lydia has no claim to any of this. Not legally, not through contest, not through loophole. I read every line. Slowly, thoroughly. He waited without rushing me. When I finished, I signed in all the spaces marked with little flags. When I put the pen down, he gathered the papers and gave me a thin folder. "What's this?" I asked. "Your mother left one last envelope," he said. "She instructed me to deliver it only after everything was finalized. She didn't want it to interfere with your decisions. She said it wasn't about property. It was personal." I nodded and took the folder. After Ulrich left, I sat with it in the same room where she once played piano on Sunday mornings. The folder was plain. No writing. Inside, a handwritten letter and a sealed envelope addressed to Lydia. The letter was for me. The message was short. I didn't always know how to say things out loud. Some truths stayed quiet too long, but you've always seen through silence. This is for her. Give it to her if you think she deserves it. I stared at the sealed envelope for a long time. There was no legal document inside. No property list. Just my mother's final attempt to give Lydia a kind of closure, or maybe a chance to understand. I waited a day before calling her. Lydia didn't answer the first time. I didn't call again. Instead, I walked to Aunt Frances's house the next morning. I didn't ring the bell. I left the envelope in the mailbox with a note. She didn't leave you money, but she left you words. I walked away. I didn't wait for a response. Back at the house, I began going through her things. It wasn't nostalgia. It was necessity. Every closet held years of accumulation. Photographs, recipes, unfinished projects. I found a shoebox in her closet filled with letters never mailed. Some were to me, written during fights or missed birthdays. Others were addressed to names I didn't recognize. One stood out. It was to someone named Eleanor. The paper was yellowed. The ink faded. She had written, "I wish I could have told you what happened. But by the time I found you again, it didn't matter anymore. I had Lydia by then. I tried to love her the way I might have loved the one I lost. But something was always missing. I think it was the truth. I didn't know who Eleanor was. Maybe a friend. Maybe more. It didn't matter now. The past was full of doors you didn't always get to reopen." By the end of the week, the house was cleaner. Not polished, but livable. I kept the photos, the books, the handwritten notes she left on the fridge with reminders to buy milk. I donated the dresses she hadn't worn in years. The piano stayed. So did the armchair with the torn cushion she always swore she'd fix. Lydia came by 2 days later. She stood at the gate, not ringing the bell, just watching. I saw her from the window but didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped outside and met her at the walkway. "You gave me this," she said, holding the opened letter. "I didn't expect you to." "I didn't expect her to write it," I replied. She looked tired. Not physically, but in a way that went deeper. Her voice was quieter now. Her tone had lost its usual edge. "She told me she tried to love me," Lydia said. "That she wanted to, but she knew it was never complete." I said nothing. There was nothing to add. "She could have told me," Lydia continued, "before the end." "She probably wanted to," I replied, "but she knew what you would have done with it." Lydia looked down. "You think I deserve this?" I didn't answer. "I thought I belonged," she said, "even if I wasn't blood. Belonging isn't about nameplates and seating charts," I said. "It's about showing up when no one's watching." She took a deep breath. "I didn't know how. I only knew how to perform." "Now you have time to figure it out," I said, "but not here." Lydia didn't argue. She nodded once. Then she walked away. No scene, no final insult, just a quiet exit. After she was gone, I sat at the piano bench and opened the lid. The keys were dusty, but they still worked. I played a few notes, clumsy, uneven, but it felt right. The house didn't need silence anymore. It needed presence. Later that night, I went through the last drawer in her bedside table. Inside was a photograph I had never seen. It was me and my mother, standing in front of this house years ago. She was smiling. I was holding a kite string. She had written a note on the back. This is when we stopped being afraid of the wind. I placed it on the mantel. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. Not because the weight was gone, but because I had finally learned how to carry it.